How can you be an informed voter in the coming May 9 elections? Vote Pilipinas presents a one-stop dashboard of verified information for you. In the prevalence of fake news, information overload, the number of candidates and party list organizations to choose from, how can we make sure that we don't drown in information and we vote for the right candidate? Vote Pilipinas, the official information campaign partner of the Commission on Elections, brings you the Candidate Profile Dashboard, your one-stop information dashboard of candidates' profiles and other election-related news and verified information. The Candidate Profile Dashboard contains key information about the national candidates for
President, Vice President, Senators, Party List,
from their political and professional experience, the laws they've contributed, to their stand on key issues. To give you a better perspective of the candidate you are voting for. Visit www.votepilipinas.com to get comprehensive information on the candidates for the May 9 elections. Be an informed voter.
Hashtag bumoto ka, Hashtag para sa bayan, Hashtag Vote Safe Pilipinas.
Vote Pilipinas, tara kumilos at makialam. Vote Pilipinas, para sa kinabukasan ng bawat isa. May pananagutan, alay natin para sa bayan. Ang boses mo'y gamitin, karapatan ang kinin. Heto na ang pagkakataon para makibahagi ang boto mo. Makapangyarihan, kaya magsama-sama para sa bayan. Vote Pilipinas, kumilos na, tara bumoto ka. Vote Pilipinas, makialam, makibahagi. Vote Pilipinas, kumilos na, tara bumoto ka. Vote Pilipinas, makialam, makibahagi para sa bayan. Para sa bayan. Vote Pilipinas, tara bumoto ka.
Ito ang debating kukumpleto sa inyong desisyon. Sa panahon ng pandemya, kawalan ng trabaho, giyera. Ngayon, higit kailanman, napakahalagang suriin ang susunod na mamumuno sa ating bansa. Sino ang may totoong solusyon? Sino ang may konkretong plano? Sino ang tapat na maglilingkod? Kasama ninyo ang Commission on Election sa pagbantay at pagkilatis sa mga susunod na leader ng ating bansa. Dito ninyo malalaman Pilipinas Debates 2022, The Turning Point. Simulcast live nationwide and worldwide. March 19, Sabado, the Presidential Debate. March 20, Linggo, the Vice Presidential Debate. April 3, Linggo, ang ikalawang Presidential Debate. April 23, Sabado, the Vice Presidential Town Hall Debate. At April 24, Linggo, the Presidential Town Hall Debate. Kilalanin natin mabuti ang mga kandidato sa pagkapangulo at pangalawang pangulo dito sa pinakamalaki at opisyal na serye ng debate. Pilipinas Debates 2022, The Turning Point.
Metro Manila is still the world's worst city to drive in. That's according to the latest data from
To our audiences joining us via Zoom and Facebook Live, thank you for being with us today. I'm your host, Darlene Dimonahan, welcoming you to the hashtag Bumoto Ka webinar series powered by Smart and Resident Viber. This series is a part of the entire hashtag Bumoto Ka campaign, together with other initiatives such as the Candidate Profile Dashboard and presidential and vice presidential debates. For today's webinar, our partners from LGBT Philippine Chamber of Commerce are ready to explain more about the current experiences of the LGBT community and how the upcoming elections will affect the progress that the LGBT community has made thus far for the betterment of equality for all. So, to help us unpack these issues, we gladly invite our organizing partner, lgbtvote.ph, to give a little more introduction about their organization and advocacy. Please watch this.
Happy Pride, everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome you all to this virtual gathering as we talk about an important topic in this electoral process, representation of a marginalized sector. When we talk about representation, specifically, we refer to the presence of the LGBT plus community vis-a-vis policy making, vis-a-vis political leadership. And we are very excited today to share with you the dreams, hopes, fears, and ambitions of the LGBT plus community, which we have gathered for the past months through our consultations with different stakeholders. We do this by relaunching our program back in 2016 called the LGBT Vote Philippines. We understand that LGBT Vote Philippines is an important program of the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce as it acts as a bridge between the community and aspiring political leaders, or the political leaders who would like to chart the path for a Philippines that should be diverse, equal, and inclusive. We believe that LGBT Vote Philippines is a good opportunity to raise to our political leaders, such as presidential candidates, the different issues that matter to the LGBT plus to LGBT plus individuals. We will be able to share it with you today, and we are very, very excited to have this conversation to ensure that, again, our issues are not just peripheral issues. LGBT plus issues should be part of the national conversation. We do this again through the by engaging different teams, different presidential candidates, as we listen to them, as we share with them these issues and understand whether they're committing to these issues, so that we change the society. We we move towards a society that is more accepting of diverse, so people with diverse SOGI. We desire that the Philippines of tomorrow will be a country that has developed that sense of belongingness, and that all types of rights, human rights, economic rights, etc., are promoted and protected by the state. We understand that it is not an easy path, but the conversation has to take place. And we have a firm belief that the conversation needs to be continuously talked about or implemented, so that our political leaders are continuously accountable, not just to a few people, but to everybody, to the entire country, to all sectors, all marginalized sectors at that. And we are very, very, again, excited to have all of you. And we hope that you will be having a great time. We pray and desire that your minds will be open, and you'll become our allies and be one with the LGBT plus community. We'd like to thank our partner, Vote Pilipinas, for always being there, for giving us the opportunity to also mainstream through your process, through the to the electoral process, the representation that we badly need these days. And we definitely want all of you to continuously become our allies, to also share the advocacy and to speak up for people who have not gain their voices, who have no voice at all for the past years. We thank our dear partners in the chamber. You know who you are, and we think that your continuing support to the to LGBT Vote Philippines and other programs of the chamber uh, is an important manifestation of a community that where acceptance is a reality. So we would like to see, as we always say in the chamber, the battle is not over until we reach the rainbow's end. And indeed, we have yet to reach that rainbow's end by making sure that every day, every step of the way, what we do to ourselves and to the community around us are, is contributing rather to a sense of belongingness. It's contributing to a more inclusive community that will embrace diversity and that will welcome inclusion, at the same time promote and protect equality. I end with a message that you always hear from the chamber. Pride is not just celebrated in June. For the chamber, for everyone, for all of us, pride should be celebrated every day. And we believe that your presence today is contributing to that celebration. We believe that by engaging you, by listening to us and listening to you, and hearing our stories, we are continuously celebrating Pride, not just in June, but from January to December. Again, thank you. And we wish you all the best. We hope you'll have a great time at this virtual gathering. And we will definitely see more of you in the coming months. I also take this opportunity to invite all of you to our culminating event on April 30, the LGBT Vote Philippines culminating event. It will be a virtual gathering as well. And please follow us on our social media, Facebook account, LinkedIn, and also our website, so that you will be informed of this virtual gathering on April 30. So we look forward to seeing you there. And till we meet again, we would like to celebrate your truth, and we like to make sure that you are also with us as we celebrate Pride every day. Thank you at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you very much for everyone's information. That was PLCC Chairperson Raymond Astelas. As he said, the battle is not over until we reach that rainbow's end, and pride should indeed be celebrated every day. So, today's session, we will be discussing so much about equality and what we as voters can do to further encourage this. So, let's not rather waste any more time and welcome today's speaker, Attorney Kino Reyes. To give you a little background, Attorney Felipe Joaquin A. Reyes III, or Kino, is a lawyer, company executive, yoga teacher, and LGBTQIA+ and HIV or AIDS advocate. Kino maintains a solo legal practice focusing on commercial, corporate, and property law. He's also vice president of their family real estate business, Philray Holdings. Kino is a certified Vinyasa yoga instructor who teaches for various communities in Metro Manila. He's the president of Yoga for Life, a non-profit organization that provides yoga classes as complementary therapy for people living with HIV. Kino is the director of the Philippine LGBT Bar Association, the first association of the LGBTQIA+ lawyers in the country, as well as legal counsel and executive board member of the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce, an organization of LGBTQIA+ and allied businesses and professionals that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in industry and public policy. Kino also mentors business startups and young professionals, as well as aspiring LGBTQIA+ advocates and organizers. So, ladies and gentlemen, Attorney Kino Reyes III. Take it away, Attorney Reyes.
Thank you for the warm introduction, Dor. I'm glad to be here with all of you. Again, I'd like to thank our partners at Vote Filipinas for having us, the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce, in your hashtag Bumoto Ka webinar series. So this particular episode of the series is entitled hashtag Bumoto Ka para sa Kakilanlan, or vote for your identity or vote according to your identity. And so in today's webinar, we will be discussing, and in our next slide, you will see, we will be discussing what is LGBT Vote PH, what are the key outcomes of the project, which are the 5 key areas of inequalities for the LGBTQIA plus community. We will also be discussing what is ahead for the project. So that will be our topics for today, and so we'll proceed. Before we discuss, though, what the project is or what the issues for the LGBTQIA plus community are, we need to know what is SOGSC. So if we can move on to the next slide. A lot of people are familiar with the term SOGIE, SOGIE, because we have heard about it in the context of the proposed SOGIE equality bill. SOGIE is almost the same as SOGIE, it's just been expanded, not just by 2 letters, but also with a couple of terms. So SOGIE, and in this case, SOGIE is an acronym. It contains a number of terms and ideas which are independent of each other and which are connected to each other. I want to point out to everyone that all of us, all persons in the world, have our own particular SOGSC, or a combination of these ideas that define our identity, our personal identity. So we will start with, actually, if you can just show all of the letters, please. We will start with actually what is the S. So S stands for sex. And I will relate that to the last 2 letters, SC, or sex or sexual characteristics. So what is sex? Sex is a category that is determined by someone else on behalf of another person. So at birth, the healthcare provider, usually it's a doctor, will make a determination of a person's sex based on that person's sexual or sex characteristics. So sex characteristics are physical or biological traits that are inherent in the person. So this includes genitalia, hormones, or chromosomes. So the doctor, for example, upon seeing the newborn child, will make a determination based on what the doctor sees on what the sex of that child is. And in the Philippines, we officially recognize only 2 sexes, male and female. However, science tells us that there are more than 2. There's actually another sex called intersex. And intersex people are people who have sex characteristics that is common to or found in both males and females. In some countries, they recognize intersex as a separate or independent category or sex. However, we don't do that in the Philippines yet. So intersex people in the Philippines are compelled to live their lives as either male or female based upon the determination of the doctor who assigned a sex to them at birth. So from there, you move on to sexual orientation, or the SO in SOGSE. Sexual orientation is basically what or to whom a person is attracted to. So it's based on attraction. So if a person is attracted to another person of the opposite sex, then that would make that person heterosexual or straight. So a man attracted to a woman or a woman attracted to a man are both straight or heterosexual persons. If a person, however, is attracted to someone of the same sex, then that would make the person homosexual or also gay or lesbian. So a man who is attracted to another man is gay, a woman who is attracted to another woman is lesbian. It is also possible for a person to be attracted to both men and women, which makes that person bisexual. It is also possible for a person to be attracted to men, women, intersex. So basically, regardless of the sex of the other person, in that case, that person would be considered pansexual. There are also people who are not sexually attracted to anybody, regardless of sex, which would make them asexual. So there are a lot of categories and ideas within sexual orientation. All of them are valid. From there, you move on to the G in GSC, which is gender. So I guess a quick recap, if sex is determined by someone else based on sex characteristics or biological or physical traits, and sexual orientation is based on attraction, gender is based on our ideas, both societal ideas and personal ideas. So gender is a set of categories and the traits, the characteristics, the actions, the appearances that we attribute to those categories. In Philippine society, we recognize mostly just two genders, male and female, or men and women. However, in other societies, they have more than two genders. This includes societies in particular in southern India, where they recognize the Hijra, or some Native American communities, also Pacific Islanders. They may recognize three or more genders. So again, gender is an idea. Gender identity is how one's personal idea of one's gender relates to society's ideas. So if a person, and then also gender identity relates to a person's sex. So if a person's sex and gender identity align or is the same, then that person is cisgender. So for example, if a man who was assigned male at birth recognizes and feels that he is a man, then he is a cisgender man. If a person's sex and gender identity do not align or they are different, then that person is transgender. So for example, if a person was assigned male at birth, so the sex of that person is male, but that person believes that she is female, her gender identity is female, then that makes her a transgender woman. There are also people who do not believe that gender should be just a binary, which is just male or female, man and woman. So some people believe themselves to be non-binary. So they do not believe themselves to be male or female. They are somewhere in between or somewhere outside of those ideas. And again, just like sexual orientation, there are a number of other concepts within gender identity. So if gender identity is a belief, gender expression is how one expresses that belief or how one communicates their gender identity to the world. So that includes physical appearance, how a person dresses, how a person acts. And so a gender expression could be more masculine, that is partaking of the traits that we normally think of as male. That for example, being, having a more muscular body, facial hair or body hair, shorter hair, wearing pants, being, say, for example, a soldier or a firefighter. So these are based on society's ideas of what being masculine is versus, for example, feminine. That is being of a more petite build, longer hair, wearing dresses and skirts, being, for example, a nurse or a homemaker. So these are, again, ideas. A lot of them are based on stereotypes, but a lot of them are also based on our own personal ideas in relation to what society's ideas are. And I mentioned all of these terms. I know there's a lot and there's a lot to take in, but I mentioned all of these because, again, every single person has a combination of all these terms. Everyone has a SOGI SC. And we need to understand this because in Philippine society and in our Philippine legal system, we tend to favor only people who are heterosexual or straight and cisgender. That is, if their sex and their gender identity align. So everyone who is not heterosexual and cisgender are automatically part of the broad spectrum of the LGBTQIA plus community. So at the again, as I mentioned, the legal system and society favors straight and cisgender, or we often call them cisgender heterosexual people. And more often than not, LGBTQIA plus persons are either ignored, discriminated, or sometimes even threatened. And this is shown in various examples in news media. So if we can move on to the next slide, you will see that there is a lot of data showing the continued prevalence of inequalities, discrimination, and violence against the LGBTQIA plus community. It includes, for example, discrimination against transgender people from using the bathrooms that align with their gender identity. It includes public officials who use terms like gay or bakla as slurs, or who claim to have been cured from being homosexual as if it was an illness, which it is not. It also includes very concerning instances where LGBTQIA plus persons are either attacked. In this case, as you can see in the slide, their people's hair is shaved just because they are a member of the LGBTQIA plus community. Sometimes persons are killed because of their identities. And also the day-to-day experience of being ignored or discriminated based simply on the fact that a person is not cisgender and heterosexual. Based just solely for being a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, there is a continuous experience of being discriminated upon. And so we discuss these things because we need to understand all of them in relation to what the LGBT Vote PH project is. So if we can move on to the next slide, you will see that the goal of the LGBT Vote PH project is to get a better perspective on the needs and the particular issues of the LGBTQIA plus community. And in order to do that, we, the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce, have conducted various focus group discussions and talks with members of the LGBTQIA plus community from all over the Philippines. We have talked to various persons. We tried to make this as inclusive and diverse as possible. Different sexes, gender identities, gender expression, sexual orientations from all over the country to hear them out. To see what they experience, what their organizations or communities experience, and to see what they need. And our goal is that we want to accumulate all of these experiences, crystallize the issues that are most important, try to come up with possible solutions to the difficulties faced by the members of the LGBTQIA plus community, and then present these issues and possible solutions to our aspiring leaders, in particular, our presidentiables. And we also want to encourage informed decision-making, not just in the LGBTQIA plus network, but also for our allies or for the casual or regular voter. And so we move on to our next slide. So we have come up with an LGBT Vote PH policy paper. So this contains all the discussions from our various talks from December 2021 to January 2022, which we have shared with the presidential candidates, and which we have also shared in the Vote Filipinas webinar, and also in the dashboard. And we will share to everyone, to the public, in our April 2022 culminating event at the end of the month. And so from there, what does the LGBT Vote policy paper contain? So it contains 5 key areas of inequalities. If you can move on to the next slide, you will see that these key areas of inequalities are: number 1, SOGSC inclusive legislation and the implementation of these laws. 2, equal access to health. 3, experiences in families and communities. 4, gender identity and expression, in particular in schools and workplaces. And number 5, involvement in media and politics. We will go through all of these key issues one by one. So we start with our first key issue, and that is GSC inclusive legislation and implementation. So if we can move on to our next slide, please. So there are a number of pressing concerns regarding inclusive legislation and initiatives which deprive Filipino LGBTQIA+ of the same rights and protections as their cisgender heterosexual counterparts. So this is basically the Philippine legal system and how the legal system currently lacks laws and mechanisms to provide LGBTQIA+ with protections or with rights and privileges that are afforded to cisgender and heterosexual persons. So if we could just show all our findings in that area, there we go. So this includes the absence of specific laws regarding the civil rights of same-sex partners. This is one of the most pressing, if not the most pressing or most brought up issue in our various focus group discussions. And even a non-LGBTQIA+ person or a cis-het person will know that this has been a hot button issue for a couple of months now. It's always asked for presidential candidates in various interviews and debates. And this is basically marriage equality or same-sex unions. So under Philippine law, marriage is defined as a special contract, a permanent union for men between a man and a woman. So there has to be different sexes for people who want to get married. And although not specifically indicated, it is understood that those sexes have to be cisgender. They cannot be transgender. So it's based again on what is assigned at birth. So because of that, members of the LGBTQIA+ community cannot marry persons of the same sex. And this creates particular problems when LGBTQIA+ persons and their partners want to avail or of the benefits of the rights or want to enforce the obligations that comes with a civil union or a marriage. And this applies to a lot of things, from co-ownership of property, to tax, to cohabitation, to making health decisions on behalf of the partner. It includes care and custody of children. So it is a whole range of rights and obligations of legal relationships, both between the partners and also affecting their children, their family, parents, siblings, other relatives, and also society at large that is not available to LGBTQIA+ persons. And so LGBTQIA+ persons have had to do all sorts of things, legal ways to try to approximate marriage. But all of these things will never fully equal marriage. And all of these things require a lot of time, effort, and money, which makes them out of reach to a vast majority of the LGBTQIA+ Filipino population. And so the proposed action based on our focus group discussions is to legalize same-sex unions. Whether this will take the form of a full-on same-sex marriage or a civil union was not agreed upon, but at the very least, we are aiming for the effects of marriage so that there can be greater protections, rights, and also responsibilities for same-sex partners. So our next current key issue here is the insufficient information and the dissemination of such information and access to such information for the legal remedies, or for the LGBTQIA+ community. So as I mentioned, as you saw in one of the slides earlier, LGBTQIA+ persons are subjected to day-to-day discrimination, both minor things to life-changing or life-threatening ones. And for most people, they have no access to mechanisms for redress. They have no way to know what they can and cannot do if they experience it in day-to-day life. And even if they know who to turn to, usually it will entail, again, time and effort and money, which they may not have. And so that's why our proposed action for this is to ensure proactive information dissemination, create campaigns on these legal remedies for the LGBTQIA+. Who can LGBTQIA+ persons turn to when they are ignored, discriminated, or threatened because of their SOGI-SC or their LGBTQIA+ identity? It was also brought up repeatedly that while some local government units have enacted their own anti-discrimination ordinances, because the SOGI Equality Bill or the Comprehensive Anti-Discrimination Bill has not been enacted into law. It has been a bill, or it has been in the stage of being enacted into law for the past more than 20 years, around 30 years, I would reckon at this point, but it's still not a law. So a lot of local government units, cities and municipalities have enacted their own anti-discrimination ordinances to fill in the gap that is caused by the non-passage of the SOGI Equality Bill. And these are positive occurrences. However, these local anti-discrimination ordinances lack implementing rules or regulations. So for those who are unfamiliar, laws, both national or local, when they are passed, usually require implementing rules and regulations, which flesh out the substance of the law and which enable people in the government, whether they are people in City Hall or police officers or barangay tanos, to fully enforce them. And so many LGUs, despite having rather anti-discrimination ordinances, lack the implementing rules and regulations to actually implement those ordinances. And so our proposed action is to prioritize the passing of the National Anti-Discrimination Bill, which is either the SOGI Equality Bill or the Anti-Discrimination Bill. Turn those into law and enact and implement a set of implementing rules and regulations for that, so that the protection for LGBTQIA+ persons isn't piecemeal, isn't based on where you live in the Philippines. You're in Quezon City and you're protected. You're in another city and all of a sudden you're not protected. Only a national law protecting the rights or preventing discrimination of LGBTQIA+ persons can fully protect the community. And then our last, another key issue here is the lack of national programs to support the LGBTQIA+. There are a number of national programs related to gender and development, or GAD, but in particular, those apply to women. And so the proposed action here is to include gender orientation and appropriate include gender orientation. Include in the GAD, in Gender and Development Program, more studies or more discussions of SOGI-SC and the LGBTQIA+ community. And also, on a more practical basis of day-to-day life, include gender orientation, example, pronouns and identifiers in all forms. Because as we know, a person can be male or female or non-binary. And so it would be best to allow that person to identify themselves if they want to, so they can have better protections or just be treated with more respect. Also, we propose to expand the National Gender and Development Resource Program of the Philippines. And yes, again, this pertains to the gender and development programs, both on a national and a local level. All right, so from there, we move on to our second key issue, and that is equal access to health. And under this key issue, we have a number of sub-issues under them. So in particular, and this is shown by data from the DOH, also data accumulated from various hospitals and healthcare facilities in the country, that HIV cases continue to rise, which affects particularly the population of young men who have sex with men, or MSM, and transgender women. So men who have sex with men are not necessarily just gay men or homosexual men. It could be bisexual men, pansexual men. It could be sex workers. And so this particular population is affected by the continued spread of HIV in the country. And so the proposed action here is to, one, increase funding for HIV programs in the country, and also to ensure equitable funding in order to provide health and social civic services to vulnerable LGBTQIA plus populations. In many big cities and municipalities in the Philippines, HIV services are provided, and this includes not just testing, but also what we call antiretroviral therapies, or the actual medicine that is needed in order for people living with HIV or PLHIVs to live healthy and normal lives. But however, in many areas of the country, particularly in far-flung regions, ARVs or these medicines are not available. Testing is not available. So people have to go to bigger cities and in certain locations in order to avail of these services, which they might not have access to, or they might not have the time or the resources to do. So another key issue here is the difficulty in accessing gender-affirming healthcare services leading to health issues. And in particular, this is for our transgender members of the LGBTQIA plus community. And so I just want to point out that transgender people, whether they are male or female or non-binary, because their sex and their gender identity don't align, it does not necessarily mean that they will change their gender expression or change their physical appearance or their actions or traits to align with their gender identity. That is not required. That is a personal decision of the transgender person. However, for transgender people who do want to align their gender identity with their expression, they undergo a procedure called gender affirming care or gender alignment services. They avail of gender alignment services. And so this includes a number of things from mental health services, counseling, to hormone therapy, to sometimes also surgery. And so these are not readily available to a lot of our transgender members of the LGBTQIA plus community, which could lead to health issues, not just in the immediate moment, but also in the long run, not just physical issues, but also mental health issues. So basically what we propose is to make aware people that these issues are common in the transgender community, and that gender affirming services should be made available to them. So next, there's also continued HIV stigma in areas requiring socio-civic intervention. So despite the passage of a new HIV law a couple of years ago, the stigma is still there. So people living with HIV, PLHIVs, still continue to face stigma in terms of employment. Also in school, they live under the threat of being outed for being PLHIV, which can affect their relationships with their families, with their co-workers, or with their communities because of this stigma. And this can also lead to health issues. So some people, because of the stigma, some PLHIVs, because of the stigma, might not avail of antiretroviral therapy, which could lead to the deterioration of their health. It can also lead to mental health problems. And so the proposal is to create an awareness campaign or drive, both online and physical, spearheaded by local government units and communities regarding HIV/AIDS, and to build confidence and trust in government and in healthcare workers, and to reduce the stigma in communities and organizations all over the Philippines. And finally, we also have as our sub-issue here, the ban on men who have sex with men from donating blood. So this is an informal ban. So whenever a person donates blood, there are all sorts of different tests that are done on the donated blood, including HIV tests. But because of the stigma, that men who have sex with men, or in particular gay men, have in connection with HIV, gay men or men who have sex with men are prohibited from donating blood. It is based purely on stigma. Science backs that as long as you are able to test the blood that is donated, it should be safe to administer to someone who needs it. Then a proposed action is to issue a government-wide policy regarding the non-discrimination of the LGBTQIA+ on blood donation. All right. So from there, we move on to our third key issue, which is experiences in families and communities. We have 2 slides for this. So we'll start with slide 1 first. If we can go back to the previous slide. There we go. So first is that LGBTQIA+ children are prone to abuse from their families due to their SOGSC. And then despite younger generations being more knowledgeable of SOGSC, there is still community-based stigma that victimize LGBTQIA+ persons. So the stigma comes not just from the immediate family, but also from the community. So neighbors, friends, school, relatives. So some proposed actions for this matter include encouraging local government units to conduct incentivized parenting workshops, both online and physical, which includes SOGSC related topics. The idea is that if more people understand what SOGSC is and the nuances of SOGSC, then we will see that there is no need to discriminate upon everyone. Everyone has SOGSC, a different combination of the terms within it, and not one is more valid or less valid than the other. Everyone is the same. There is also a need to craft and implement inclusive policies and programs on the treatment of those who are abused or victimized on the basis of their SOGSC. So as I mentioned earlier in one of the previous key issues, LGBTQIA+ persons do not know their redress mechanisms on what they can do or who they can turn to if they are victimized. And even if they do, there is no mechanism to help them out after they are victimized in terms of helping them deal with the emotional scars or the economic effects of being subject to discrimination. There is also a need to increase efforts to establish LGBTQIA+ friendly facilities and services, such as gender-neutral comfort rooms. And if we move on to our next slide, some sub-issues here include, this is in particular to LGBTQIA+ senior citizens or elderlies. They do not have, there are very, very few institutions in the country that are able to provide services to LGBTQIA+ elderlies that are responsive to their needs as LGBTQIA+ persons. And so the proposal is to develop government-funded retirement institutions to accommodate the needs of LGBTQIA+ elderlies, or to conduct training in existing government institutions so that the workers there are able to provide or be more sensitive to the needs of the LGBTQIA+ elderlies. And finally, our last sub-issue for this topic, deaf participants or hearing impaired participants shared how communication barriers have led them to miss opportunities to dialogue with their fellow LGBTQIA+ members. So even within the LGBTQIA+ community or spectrum, there are certain sub-communities or groups who are unable to fully communicate with or integrate to the broader LGBTQIA+ movement. And so the proposed action here is to ensure the accessibility of disability-friendly services in all LGBTQIA+ decision-making dialogues and campaigns. And this is not just for public policy, but also for private institutions, whether work, or NGOs, or schools. And from there, we move on to our next key issue, gender identity and expression in schools and in workplaces. So again, we have 2 slides for this. We'll just start with the first one. So students who identify as LGBTQIA+, continue to find their school experience impaired by bullying and discrimination, in particular because of their SOGSC. And there is a lack of resources and programs about SOGSC in schools. And so the proposed actions here is to reinforce existing Department of Education policies or regulations to conduct gender and development workshops and trainings for schools, for teachers and administrators, to review discriminatory policies in educational institutions, in particular with regard to haircuts, uniforms, and other ways that we force students to make their physical appearance conform to a particular model, which may not be aligned with their gender identity or expression, or which inevitably hurt them either physically or mentally. And also another proposed action is to monitor compliance with existing Department of Education regulations on the adoption of SOGSC topics in the basic education curriculum. In our second slide, we have one more sub-issue there, and that is there is a lack of concrete policies or programs of local companies for gender inclusivity. And this from schools we move on to workplaces, and the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce did a study in 2018 where we found out that there were 0 local or Philippine companies that were 100% compliant with LGBTQIA+ friendly policies or diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So in the couple of years since that, there have been progress, but there needs to be more progress, and it needs to come at a faster rate. And some proposed actions with regard to that are to encourage and incentivize the adoption of government policies on fostering gender-inclusive workplaces by all private institutions and enterprises. So government has to step in and tell private institutions to have more diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, and to promote degendering fashion or expression in schools and in workplaces. So basically to allow persons to dress and to act and to have, to appear as they want to be based on their gender identity and expression, and not to penalize them just because they don't fall within a particular category, don't act or dress or look a certain way, right? And finally, our last key issue, which we have divided into 2 slides, is involvement in media and politics. And so members of the LGBTQIA+ community feel that there is still not enough, or there are insufficient representation, in particular with regard to decision making in government, and also representation in media, which tends to be stereotyped. And so some sub-issues here include homophobic stances of government officials, which negatively affect the perspective of the general population regarding the LGBTQIA+ community, and the lack of direct involvement of the LGBTQIA+ community in consultation and policy making on various levels, both from the lowest level, barangay, going up to your cities and municipalities, province, then going up to the national level. And some proposed actions with regard to this include the promotion of LGBTQIA+ trainings or knowledge sharing and government training programs on all levels, national and local, to promote policy-making dialogues and consultations with the LGBTQIA+ community, as diverse set of organizations as possible, to ensure the accessibility of disability-friendly services in all LGBTQIA+ policy-making dialogues and campaigns we mentioned earlier with regard to our hearing impaired brethren. And also in our final slide, regarding our last key issue, the rise of online bullying and media disinformation against LGBTQIA+. So the proposed action when it comes to this is to ensure proactive information dissemination campaign on legal remedies. In this age of social media, bullying has basically just shifted from real life to social media. It may have gotten worse because of the anonymity provided by the internet. And so our remedy for this is one, to provide services to members of the LGBTQIA plus community. We indicated legal, but it has also been mentioned that there should be mental health services and community services in order to help people who are victimized by online bullying and discrimination. So there, these key issues and our proposed courses of action are encapsulated in the LGBT Vote PH policy paper, which we will share with the public in our culminating event at the end of the month. And so if we can move on to the next slide. That is what we hope to share with you, the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce. And our ultimate goal is that, in particular, members of the LGBTQIA plus community, but also our allies, or maybe just your regular voter, can vote with pride, whether in themselves, in their loved ones, or even in total strangers, and also vote for love, vote for equality, vote for a better system for the country, in particular for the LGBTQIA plus community, and vote according to your identity. Vote according to the issues that resonate with you, and the proposed or course of actions of the candidates that aim to address those issues. So vote with pride and vote for love. And of course, we are very much open to any suggestions or comments from the general public. So you can get in touch with the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce in our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and we will gladly hear from you and connect with you. So there. And that concludes our LGBT Vote PH discussion for today.
All right. Thank you very much, Attorney. I honestly learned a lot from today's session. And well, vote with pride and vote with love. You know, the best thing about what Attorney shared is that the organization is very keen on doing research, as Attorney discussed in detail, using the LGBT vote policy paper. So watch out for that, because I heard that it's going to be shared. So in as much as I have more questions to ask, I'm sure that the viewers may do so too. Good news is you may contact Attorney Reyes through the social media pages. And Attorney, do we have any email address that they can be sending their queries to?
Well, I suggest you you visit our social media pages and just send us a private message, whether it's on Instagram or on Facebook, and we will connect with you there. If you do want to email us, you can email us at lgbtvote.ph@gmail.com. And we will be glad to share the results of our studies with all of you.
All right. Thank you very much. Again, lgbtvote.ph@gmail.com. So thank you once again. We still have 26 days before the May 9 elections, which means 26 days more to gather the right information to assess the candidates running for office. Vote Filipinas has various ways that you can learn more about the upcoming 2022 national elections. First off, head to votefilipinas.com and check out the candidate profile dashboard for all of the information you need about the candidates. We're not stopping there. Make sure to stay tuned to upcoming webinars in the coming few weeks, with our last two webinars next week, April 22, 2022. And that's not all again. Catch the Vice Presidential Town Hall debate on April 20, Saturday, and the Presidential Town Hall debate on April 24, Sunday, live online, on TV, and radio. Stay updated on the latest about Vote Filipinas activities, such as the Filipinas debates, caravans, and more by joining the Vibe with the Nation with Vote Filipinas community channel on Viber. Simply scan the QR code on the screen in front of you and join the community for a clean and safe election. As we continue to spread awareness for voters' information, we at Vote Filipinas hope that you can join in and be part of our advocacy. Make sure to use the code Canva times VotePH seen on screen, because in partnership with Canva, we are offering all of you who have finished today's webinar a free 3-month subscription to Canva Pro. Again, it's Canva times VotePH. So make sure to use that code. Take note, this code can only be redeemed until May 21, 2022. Again, it's only until May 21, 2022. Of course, for all our viewers looking to book their flights home for the upcoming elections, it's your chance because when you fly home to vote on May 9, you can get your return ticket for free. In partnership with AirAsia Super App, Vote Filipinas encourages every Filipino to have the power to change the future. Hashtag bumoto ka. Make sure to create an account on AirAsia Philippines official website or mobile app before booking to avail the promo. And remember, booking period is from April 4 to April 10, 2022, while the travel period is from April 4 to September 30, 2022. You can also find Vote Filipinas through various social media pages. On Facebook, just search for the verified Vote Filipinas page. On Instagram, Twitter, and follow us at Vote Filipinas. Subscribe also to the official Vote Filipinas YouTube channel and stay connected with us to be updated on the Vote Filipinas campaign. As Election Day draws closer and closer, we as Filipinos have the responsibility to create changes in our society today. Sa daan ng Kakilanlan, maaari tayo na gumawa ng mabuti para sa ating bansang Pilipinas. Hashtag bumoto ka para sa Kakilanlan ngayong 2022 national elections. Hashtag bumoto ka this May 9, 2022. Muli ako si Darlene Timonahan. Maraming salamat po. Magandang gabi.